Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Monday edition of Moohead Radio. I'm your host, a big and furry bovine. For the next however long I can carry on, we'll be talking about Northeast Ohio sports, including the Cleveland Browns and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and some things that, quite honestly, paint a very interesting portrait of where divide and conquer has really injured the Browns fan base. I start out with a story that is all too common. While playing Madden at the Pro Bowl, little discussion between David Njoku and Micah Parsons, where Micah Parsons said, well, Cleveland is Cleveland, and started that shit. And then Njoku basically snapped back at him and said, look, both of us are sitting here playing a video game. We're not playing in the Super Bowl. So shut the fuck up, basically. Now, here's the thing. If Micah fucking Parsons, who plays for the biggest choke-worthy organization on the face of the earth, the most overrated, most braggadocious, an owner who is as slimy as Jimmy Haslam, who has made life miserable for countless head coaches, offensive coordinators, players, you name it, and who has Dak Prescott as a quarterback, and who year after year after year just totally puke on themselves come the playoffs. And this guy is saying, Cleveland is Cleveland. Let me explain something. Whether you like Deshaun Watson or you don't like Deshaun Watson, whether you like Joe Flacco or don't like Joe Flacco, whether you think that Myles Garrett doesn't do enough or that he's godlike, whatever it is that you think, whether Ken Dorsey should be offensive coordinator or not, you're going to be basically painted with the same brush by everybody. All of us are, because we're Cleveland Browns fans. And if a player can say that to the face of a player when his own team is the most choke-worthy team in recent history, tells you just how free people are to criticize the city of Cleveland. And if you didn't grow up there in the area like I did, you would know you're just parroting what has been repeated over and over and over for decades. You say something often enough, and it becomes truth. And the amazing part of this, to me, is that our fan base can't agree on anything. Everybody makes fun of the Cleveland Browns organization. Everybody, the networks, the announcers, all the editorial sports talk programs, they shit all over my home state. They shit all over it. And here we are, fans shitting all over one another. It makes no sense. What it does is it makes you what you are. I question that you're Cleveland Browns fans. We all should be wanting the same thing. But I'll tell you this. If you want to build a culture, build it with guys like David Njoku, because he didn't sit back and just accept it. He came, shot right back. The job in Cleveland is not convincing a fan base of anything. That's not their job. The job in Cleveland is to get your players buying into a system that makes them feel like they're going to win every week they go out onto the field. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to win. It just means that they don't go out and just not try like we've seen so many Browns teams in the past. And you know how it goes with neighborhood bullies and the weak kid in the neighborhood. Everybody beats up on the weak kid. Even kids who normally wouldn't be bullies, they say, well, I can whip that guy's ass, and they just take pot shots. That's what it is. It would be nice if all Cleveland Browns fans could just kind of put all this other small shit behind them and just say, you know, we want Cleveland to win because we think it's a good city. We enjoy living in Northeast Ohio. There's a lot of good stuff to do there. You can be successful living in Northeast Ohio, just like everywhere else in the United States. And I've been to a lot of states in my life. The reason I chose to come back to Northeast Ohio is not only because I was raised there, but because I can tell you what it's like in other places, and it's great to see all of the fandom. Just yesterday, I was out along with Rocks, who some of you know, some of you don't, my significant other. And we were karaoke singing, and it was really a cool place called Jiggs Landing. And it was right on the Braden River, and real nice, quiet, peaceful area. And so it's my turn to go up and sing. And I go, all right. And I look out, and there's a guy with his wife, and he's got a Cleveland shirt on. And before I did anything with the instrumental or the song starting, I went, "Go Browns!" And the guy's eyes lit up. And afterwards, I got done singing. He came up to me and said, "You're the man." Because we're both Northeast Ohio people, and we may have been in Florida. He may have been visiting, or he may now make his home down here. But deep down, he's still from Northeast Ohio. And he was wearing the Browns colors and the whole 9 yards. It was great. And the fact is, you know, I don't think this is the case, David, because Cleveland is a very profitable franchise. It was the only reason why we got a second chance after Art Modell pulled our team out, is because the fan base, I mean, if you look, it's the same thing with the Cowboys. They always sell a ton of team paraphernalia, and honestly, they have a big fan base. And the Browns have Browns backers clubs in every city that I've ever worked in and lived in. I think it is profitable, and that's the only reason why a thief like Jimmy Haslam would buy the team. And look at the value of the team. I mean, he's going to sell it for over $1 billion eventually. And, you know, he's got more money than he knows what to do with anyway. So, and here's somebody, you know, Amsterdam saying over 300 members in Jupiter, Florida. On the fucking planet Jupiter, there would be Browns backers clubs. I think it is profitable. I think it's also profitable for sports talk programs to badmouth Cleveland. We have a very active fan base, a very reactive fan base. And I think they can get under the skin and get a lot of self-promotion just out of the echo of Browns fans and Cleveland fans being fed up with the constant crap message that they put out. But it gets them an immediate reaction, you see. I think it's profitable for sports talk. It gives them something to talk about and fall back on when they have nothing else to talk about. Seriously. So, what I'll tell you is this: we're all the same in the eyes of the press, in the eyes of the national television media. We're all exactly what Micah Parsons thinks we are. And he feels so confident saying it, even though his team is a fucking veritable shithole. That's the bottom line. If you ever been in Texas, I've been in Texas. The prairie dunes are not like perfume, folks. We don't have the problems in Ohio that they have in Texas. No, no, no. Completely different environment. So that's the first thing. Why be tarred by the same brush? Let's get together on things. I think it would be a wonderful thing. Maybe I'm preaching an odd message. The Browns officially introducing their new coordinators. Ken Dorsey came out and talked, and he said pretty much what you'd expect him to say. Well, whether he calls the plays or I call the plays, like the pine trees lining the winding road, I've got a job, I've got a job, right? He's employed. What is he going to say? He doesn't know whether he's going to be calling the plays or not. And he knows that Deshaun Watson is his quarterback. He's been told that's the way it's going to play out. And he's going to make the best of it because he basically is treating Deshaun Watson like a reclamation project. Although he didn't use those words. He wants him to be elite again. That sounds like a reclamation project to me. But he has the ammunition within him to do it, Ken Dorsey believes. We'll see. One of the interesting things in the hiring of Ken Dorsey is the problem that the Browns and the Bills both had with turnovers this past season. But there are people in the press who are trying to link these two circumstances together. When the Bills lost to the Broncos, and at the time that Ken Dorsey got fired from Buffalo, somebody had to be the one. Because it wasn't going to be Josh Allen, even though at the time he led the league in interceptions. He was the biggest source of their turnovers. But he ain't going to pay the price. Hell to the nah. Going to be the offensive coordinator. The Cleveland Browns had a lot of reasons for turnovers. One, how could you start with one? Well, you can start with throwing interceptions. And it started with PJ Walker. Now, DTR was not real big at throwing interceptions, but he wasn't really big in throwing, period. PJ Walker wanted to have a mad bomber kind of image, and he just threw the ball into the other team's hands. And by the time Joe Flacco took the reins of the team, it's like, whoa. He had on his own to get the most mileage out of an offense that really didn't have but one really, well, two, if you count the tight end, decent receivers. And teams could double team these players. He had to fit the ball into very tight areas. I don't blame Joe Flacco one bit. He went back and threw to a specific spot on the field because the men didn't have enough separation. And sometimes when you run timing patterns, if somebody zags instead of zigs in the defense, you can throw it into their hands. Flacco threw too many interceptions. And Deshaun Watson threw interceptions too, because when your receivers do not have a whole lot of separation, it happens. But there's no tie-in between the Buffalo Bills and the Cleveland Browns. Just because the Cleveland Browns turned the ball over a lot this year doesn't mean they're going to this coming season. And just because Ken Dorsey in the first half of last year, the Bills, turned the ball over a lot, the year before that, they did not. And Josh Allen didn't throw that many interceptions. Every season is a little different. So I don't see, again, it's just another talking point to try to divide Cleveland Browns fans. You know, the job that Ken Dorsey has to do is obviously get the players to buy in to the offense. Personally, I think that Stump Mitchell was a certain kind of motivator and teacher. And I think that the motivation was wearing players down. I think the approach that he took was a great approach when you had a disciplined running back like Nick Chubb. And at the time, in the beginning, when you had a Kareem Hunt who was coming back into the league after suspension, who really wanted to prove himself, not just for the Browns, but his future career and contracts that he could sign in the future. But the message gets lost when it's repeated over and over again. And the players who ended up running the football, whether it's Pierre Strong or whoever it is, Jerome Ford, the message didn't get through and he wasn't connecting. So now you're going to bring in somebody more passionate. And hopefully they'll hear the message. But I have a saying that consultants were born to be fired. Consultants are brought into a company to maybe give a different look to things so that the employees can see things around them in a different light. Offensive coordinators are consultants, and they were born to be fired. Either they get fired or they have a really good season and they're a head coach. One thing or the other. That if you're Ken Dorsey and you start out as a quarterback coach and you work your way up to being called an offensive coordinator, nobody's talking about Ken Dorsey as being a head coaching candidate, even though Buffalo was successful and had a good offense. Nobody was talking about that. The reason you remain an offensive coordinator is you're one step away from glory. Or if you're the former head coach of the San Diego Chargers, you're a defensive coordinator who gets promoted and believes that you're an offensive genius, and it turns out that it's not the case. If you're Pittsburgh Steeler offensive coordinator and you just believe that the answer is to hand the ball off every time and run, whatever silly up the middle runs, and you have no passing game because you don't have a quarterback anymore, you get fired. But the bottom line is, if you have a named quarterback like Josh Allen, now with CJ Stroud, right? All around the league, if you have that kind of a guy, if that guy doesn't have that good of the beginning of a season, halfway through, you're asked, could be grass very, very quickly. That's the way it works because consultants were born to be fired. That's how I see everything with Ken Dorsey. If the team does well, he has a job. Just like AVP did. Let's be honest. AVP rode through some tough times, but they had a good year, but then he at least got hired into a horrible situation. But he got hired. I mean, even Ken Dorsey was honest enough to say that we make our mortgage money, us coaches. We're working men. We don't get the big bucks like head coaches do. We don't get the long-term contracts that some head coaches do. It's all got to be based upon what have you done for me lately? And that's the whole thing. And the answer with Buffalo was not enough. And he acknowledged that in speaking to the press today. He acknowledged that. He said, same thing here in Cleveland. We didn't get the job done this past year. He goes, in the half of the season that I was there in Buffalo, we didn't get it done either. Way too many turnovers. But maybe they got sick and tired of the ranting and the screaming and the smashing of tablets. And maybe there's a tonic for all of these woes, but that the tonic wears off. And that's when they get fired. Now, something that I wanted to I really look with a jaundiced eye toward all reporting right now because I look underneath what the reason is why somebody would talk about certain things when there's nothing really much to talk about. Now they're saying that the 49ers are displeased with their Super Bowl practice field. Now, why is this a story? Why are they talking about this ad nauseum on ESPN? What's the reason? They even went as far as saying the average hardness for fields that are practice fields in the NFL averages 78 on a hardness scale, with no field being less than 70 around the league. The 49ers field is considered in the 50s, according to Adam Schefter. The league inspects playing surfaces along with the NFLPA before every Super Bowl. However, all of this was supposed to have been done, they're saying, all the way back when. Shouldn't be happening just a week away from the game. These things shouldn't be noticed. And you know why this is a story? Because of gambling. It changes the odds. And I guess people say, oh, look at that. The 49ers, man. 49ers were pissed off about their practice field. They're not able to practice the way they want to because it's a hard track compared to where they're used to playing. And that's not going to be the case of what the field's going to be like in the Super Bowl. Maybe you shouldn't put your money on that team. Maybe you should put your money where we want you to put your money, on the Kansas City Chiefs, and follow the drama of Kelsey and Swifties. Maybe. But I don't believe any of this shit. I don't believe any of it. It always comes down to one thing. Two teams hit the field. One is more ready than the other. One is more prepared than the other. Ask the Browns about the Texans. They will tell you. They will be honest. The team wasn't prepared. One team will be prepared. One team will be less prepared. if both teams are prepared, you're going to have a hell of a war on your hands. But if the 49ers are having any problems whatsoever, the Kansas City defense will eat them alive. The prognostications, I have no fucking prognostications. All these stories are just designed for people who want to spend millions and millions of dollars of hard-earned money on this shit. Now we come to another part of the program. Is it over for Bill Belichick? Is he finished? His son, Steve, took the job as defensive coordinator at Washington. Now, that's really interesting. The University of Washington hires Bill Belichick's son as a defensive coordinator. You would think that if Belichick was really going somewhere, he'd want his sons with him. Nothing from Bill. Bill's been passed over. So you wonder, Belichick, if he doesn't land somewhere for a year, maybe somebody will be desperate enough the following year. But man, like all things on the shelf, you get it while it's hot and fresh. Bill Belichick is neither one of those things. His son is 36 years old. And he previously worked with the newly hired coach at the University of Washington. So, it's interesting. Then, if we're talking about teams that deserve to be kind of, the Browns is Browns thing, how come we don't hear more about the Commanders? The worst name since the Guardians. They hired the flaky Cliff Kingsbury as offensive coordinator. Can you believe that? There are things this organization does, and it doesn't matter who the owner is or what the situation is. That organization can't get out of their own way. Cliff Kingsbury is a total flake. Unbelievable hire. But nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about it. Where is Commanders are Commanders? Nowhere. Yeah, because they don't have any fucking fans left. The people with the goddamn pig masks and all, gone. They have no identity now. What are they, Commanders? Oh, they got wear parachutes? What the fuck? No fan base. No buzz. You talk about the Washington Commanders, you have a boutique program like this one. It's not like ESPN has the lead story as the Washington Commanders. But I thought it was funny that they hired a flake. On the last program, we talked about Joel Hans Embiid, the 76ers, and how they were reporting that he had a lateral meniscus issue, and they were very cautious when they worded the information regarding Embiid and his meniscal injury. They're saying the door isn't closed on a return this season. It's like, now hold on here. Is it me? Or does a torn meniscus take 6 to 8 weeks to heal? What's the story here? The part of the story that is interesting to me is that Embiid was complaining of a sore knee a month ago. And the organization just kept putting him out there for major minutes. What kind of wear and tear would that create? It's called arthritis, folks. And once the destructive pattern of arthritis strikes, all of the cartilage in the general vicinity of the injury, weakens, gets thinner, gets eroded, and eventually you wind up bone on bone, especially if you're a big man like Embiid carrying the weight that he's carrying. If it takes longer than 6 to 8 weeks, I mean, loose bodies is what they said was the issue with Evan Mobley. All loose bodies are is if pieces of cartilage kind of fall out into the knee cavity. And what it can do is it can get stuck in the joint so you can have intermittent locking of your knee. I had this, so I know. Now, Evan Mobley, if he had torn meniscal tissue, kind of tells me that he's got some erosion. But they got him immediately into surgery. 6 weeks later, he came back. He's looking fine. And this is not so stupid what Amsterdam's saying, which is a surprise. Greg Oden syndrome. Exactly. Once it sets in, I remember him struggling up the court at Ohio State, and I was going, man, he's too damn young. He's too damn young to be looking like that. Well, Embiid, if he's not coming back this season, there's a major problem. And he is the main guy in Philadelphia. And the Sixers have lost ground. And if they're saying that the door isn't closed on a return this season, they may be referring to the regular season. It's going to definitely affect where they position themselves for the playoffs. But there's no reason why he shouldn't come back from this without a problem unless there is further damage. I don't know that there is. He's 29 years old. He missed game 5 of the 2021 first round playoff series against the Wizards with a meniscal tear in his right knee and had season-ending injury on his left meniscus in 2016-2017. This is not a new problem for him, and it is progressive. I can tell you all about it. It doesn't get better. You can't grow cartilage tissue in your knee. They cannot implant cartilage tissue in your knee. When it's gone, it's gone. So I don't know. This may all be coming back to haunt the 76ers in the worst possible way. Most recently against the Golden State Warriors, Jonathan Kuminga fell on Embiid's knee, and he was complaining about soreness prior, and who knows what damage was done. Who knows? But it's not a good thing. One thing I don't understand is who cares about the UFL? I mean, when you take two losing things and combine them, it doesn't make a good thing. 43 games in sum total of the league, including the 4 teams that are involved in this. I can't imagine the XFL, the USFL together, and people are going to give a shit. It's a 10-game schedule, folks. I'm sorry. If you watch that, you got nothing else to do. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Super Bowl champ, 3-time NFL Pro Bowl player, is dead at the age of 75. Tight end from the New York Jets, Richard Castor. He was also a wide receiver and tight end. He was 75 years old after a long illness. Long illness. He died in his sleep. Are they going to donate his brain? Highly doubt it. This happens all the time. And I can guarantee you, when they start saying long illnesses, They ain't talking about cancer, most likely, folks. They're talking about Alzheimer's disease. But nobody wants to say that. He was a good football player. Kind of a sad thing. And then this nugget. Le'Veon Bell is attempting an NFL return, but says he'll only play with the Steelers. Good. You know what we say about Pittsburgh and the Yinzers, don't you? I've been in Pittsburgh. Is it a bad place? Yeah, really? No, it's not. But I just think that it's, if you wanted to attempt to return to the NFL, for God's sakes, you got to fan out your possibilities. It's not like I'll come back, but I'll only play in Pittsburgh, and then every other team goes, fuck him. He doesn't want to be here. He's washed up anyway. Well, that's because Le'Veon Bell saw the people who were trying to run the football in Pittsburgh and how not so good. Now, I'd say Warren is okay. Not really sold on Najee Harris particularly. So he thinks he can get back in there again. And that might be something up here too. I haven't heard his name in a while. Here's another thing I don't understand what the point is. The Kansas City Royals just gave Bobby Witt Jr. $288.8 million. I didn't know the Kansas City Royals had $288.8 million because God only knows they don't have any home TV coverage. There's no interest in that team whatsoever. Sound familiar, Cleveland, about baseball? Nothing. You know why they agree to a contract like that? Because they have no intention of paying it. They're going to try to get 2 good years out of Bobby Witt Jr., and if he turns out to be the player they hope he is, then he becomes available in some way, shape, or form. The team says, okay, we can trade him, but only if you give us a gazillion things for him. And then a team like, well, God only knows, the Atlanta Braves or the New York Mets and their, filthy snot owner. They'll pay him. They'll pick up that contract because they're rolling in money. This is the way that the Kansas City, I was going to say Chiefs, Royals, try to keep baseball alive in a city that doesn't give a fuck about their baseball team. Sound familiar, Cleveland? You know what the news was with the Guardians? Hey, the Guardians are going to have to face one of their old nemesis and friends, Carlos Santana. He's back in the AFC. Listen to me, the MLB Central. He's back again. Is he ever going to go away? He's played for every team. And why are we concerning ourselves with that? You can't be afraid of Carlos Santana now. He doesn't even play the guitar anymore. Make it stop, dear God. Make it stop. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Cleveland Cavaliers because it's well worth the time spent. Playing good basketball. I want to, with all the trade deadline stuff coming up, I really wish we move Karis LeVert and get somebody for him that will round out this team because I think Karis LeVert's superfluous for this team. I think that you have Donovan Mitchell, you have Darius Garland, and you don't need these people to be on the floor at the same time, folks. And you don't need to play Garland heavy minutes because honestly, his body hasn't been able to hold up all that well. He averages playing about 64 games a season, 65. So he has issues staying on the court. But what we can use is maybe a better player than Dean Wade. Not that Dean Wade's a terrible player, but if we're looking for some form of bench balance, we have some sharpshooters. We've got Sam Merrill, who's come out of nowhere. We have Georges Niang, who in last game he was pathetic shooting the ball, but he has done more scoring than I thought he would. Austin Carr calls him the G Wagon. It's like, all right. He looks like Homer Simpson to me. His body looks doughy, but he's all right. Max Strus has lost his sense of direction on his shot. Does a lot of things on the floor, though. He's an emotional player. He's frenetic, and he's always moving, as is Sam Merrill. The problem we have with Karis LeVert is he's not a ball handler. He's not a point guard. He's a guy who wants to come off the bench and score points. But you can't be both. You can't be the playmaker and score a ton of points. The ball sticks in his hand too much. And he's supposed to be on the floor at the same time that guys like Niang and Strus and Merrill, who should be the guys that you're running off screens and finding in the open court. And Karis LeVert isn't doing it. Sam Merrill's worst games are when this guy's on the floor, Karis LeVert. Not that I have anything against him. He tries real hard, but he doesn't fit what the Cavaliers team needs at this point. Now, they could do nothing. They could do nothing at the deadline, and that would be entirely possible. But I think if you really want to get the second unit moving, there's two things you can do. You can stagger the playing time of Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, or you can let CPJ come out on the floor and be a playmaker and set up the floor, but it's not going to be for a ton of minutes. They're building more minutes for Karis LeVert as a justification for what he's being paid, folks. He's playing more minutes and sometimes more successive minutes as far as in between times that he comes out of the game that has pissed his agent off. Because he has a history of lower extremity injuries. And regardless of what Karis says, he'll go anywhere that allows him to hoist up as many shots as he wants because he is a volume shooter. And that's the identity he wants to have coming off the bench and making some money. It's like Colin Sexton is doing with the Utah Jazz. Colin Sexton, nobody questioned his ability to score points in Cleveland, but he's short and he can't play defense for shit. He'll come in and he'll score points. Maybe he's shooting threes a little better now than he did when he was in Cleveland, but for the most part, he was a small point guard who scored twos. He would be like CPJ, but without the hops. So I would prefer to see Porter Jr. getting an opportunity to play and build upon what he can be with this team and moving on from LeVert and getting a guy who is a 3, who could double as a 2/3, but be a defensive guy with a better 3-point shot. Karis LeVert is at 33.7% this year from 3. He's got the lowest overall shooting effectiveness rating of 53.1. He only shoots 43% from the field, period. Got to move on from him. And I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it's a mistake what they're doing. I will leave doing Austin, Mushel, to Mrs. Austin. I don't want to do Austin. Let her say, get that weak stuff out of here. Austin, my man. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about in regards to the Cavaliers, which is really kind of exciting stuff, is that Mobley really played a nice game. Now, you're going to say, well, it's against the Spurs, and the Spurs don't really beat anybody. Maybe they can give you a run for their money. And Pop is tanking. He is. And they got to get other players surrounding Wembanyama. They do. Wembanyama, it was brought to my attention by a very close friend that Wembanyama last year, when he played in Europe, played in 34 games. Only 34. He doesn't know what it's like playing in an 82-game season. He has no idea. He's gassed, man. You know, and that's the hardest part of being a young player. You come from college or you come from background like Wembanyama does, and you're a young phenom, but you don't have the strength. The same thing could be said for Evan Mobley when he came up from USC. It's just he just didn't have the strength. Got to put on weight, got to put on muscle, but aerobically, you got to get accustomed to building up your mass for durability. And that is a problem for the Spurs. It's going to take 3 to 4 years. I mean, if you take a look at Giannis and what he was like when he first came into the league, skinny kind of guy, you know, and then he got bigger and stronger. And it took him really, I think he was like 13 a game and then 16 a game, then finally hit the 20s. Now is up 30 points a game. It took him a good 4 or 5 years to develop. But what I saw in Evan Mobley playing against Wembanyama and getting the opportunity to play the 5 was that he was shooting a clean-looking three-point shot, getting an opportunity to camp out behind that line as opposed to just standing at the elbow. It's like one play where they threw the ball in, you just threw it right back to Merrill, who buried a 3 from the corner. You pick your poison. But 3 for 3, I'm not saying that Evan Mobley is a three-point shooter, but if you can make 36 to 38% of those three-point shots, you're a threat. Everybody is going to lay back on Evan because they're going to dare him to shoot that shot. If he buries that shot 36 to 38% of the time, that means he will be hitting at a higher clip than Karis LeVert. He also plays remarkable defense. If you just watch, if you can rewatch the first quarter of the Spurs game, watch how many shots Evan Mobley totally messed with. He was just on top of everything. He went strong to the basket and dunked. He shot from outside. He drove across the lane. And I'll tell you honestly, Wembanyama couldn't keep up with him because he's gassed. Now, the other thing I want to say about Evan Mobley, it's really something you got to do day in, day out. It can't be just when you're excited or you're psyched up to play against the next phenom in the NBA in San Antonio. You got to be able to do it. You got to do it every night. You got to bring it every night. And we'll see if this three-point shooting is something he can continue doing or if he'll go back to being kind of lackluster. The only question about this Cavalier team in my mind after the experience with the Knicks in the playoffs last year, do they have the toughness and the focus? And if we say that about Jared Allen, we say that about Evan Mobley. You know, I think that is the whole thing with Evan Mobley. He's good. He's real good. But he's got to push harder. And he's got to push through the early walls that Wembanyama is facing right now, which are, you know, physical. It's a physical league. And you got to get up and down the floor, and you got to bang. You got to put on some weight and some muscle. But other than that, I mean, I think that this Cavaliers team at least did what they were supposed to do, unlike the Browns, who keep saying, well, maybe we don't need a wide receiver. The Cavaliers understood that when you have Donovan Mitchell and you have Darius Garland, who we haven't had Darius Garland for a rather large stretch, or Evan Mobley, but they brought in Strus, they brought in Niang, and they found Sam Merrill, who honestly, when I saw this, why is this guy even on the roster? I really had heard rumors that it was a favor to Sam Merrill's agent. I heard all kinds of stories. It was really peculiar. But the bottom line is he could shoot. But you got to be setting screens for him. He's got to be moving all the time, and the ball's got to be moving all the time. You got to anticipate when he's curling off that screen and get the ball instantly into his hands, because he gets rid of the shot as fast as anybody in the NBA, and it's accurate. He's only 6'4", so he needs help. He needs to use those screens. He's never going to be able to use the screens if Karis LeVert is just pounding the ball up and down and the ball just sticks. And never going to work. Tonight, the Cavaliers are back home. And that's, I think, against the Sacramento Kings. And the Kings are a pretty decent team. I'm not going to tell you that they are, but they do have some players, and Sabonis gives us all kinds of problems down low. And I don't know why, because he's not that big, but he's quick off his feet, and he really is a Cavs killer. Always has been. So I'm excited to see them play tonight. After seeing the most ridiculous thing that I've seen in the last game, you're beating up the San Antonio Spurs, and some bozo second stringer, Zach Collins, is just frustrated because he's not shooting straight and elbows Donovan Mitchell in the face, knocks him right to the ground. Mitchell gets up and pushes him, and they both get ejected. I don't understand this. I think the rule should be changed. If you have replay and it shows that a guy gives you a forearm shiver or does something that is intentionally designed to separate you from your senses, that you have a right to get up and shove him. Nothing more than that. Donovan Mitchell said, "You knocked me down, I'm coming after you." And that's the spirit that we want. But what's ridiculous is, why should both teams be penalized when a bozo bench player can go after our best player and provoke that kind of thing and get high fives in the locker room afterwards if he can get our guy bounced out of the game? That's bullshit. After the game, Donovan Mitchell said it was just a dirty play, and JB Bickerstaff said it was a dirty ass play. And when he was asked about it, Zach Collins said, "Yeah, probably was." Well, fuck that shit. That's not to be tolerated. Got to suspend that guy for a couple of games, because that's not the way you want the game to be played. You don't want to have more Draymond Greens in the league. It's ridiculous. Never made sense to me. Never made sense to me with the Steelers either. They would do something absolutely filthy when the officials aren't looking, and then somehow they'd be looking at it when our guy would react and throw the flag against Cleveland. This is the same kind of thing. Zach Collins cannot get Donovan Mitchell thrown out of a basketball game when he deliberately delivers an elbow to a guy's jaw. That can't go down that way. But I'm glad that we have players who stand up for ourselves, and that's the way you got to do it, even if the rule stinks. So we'll see what happens. 7:00 tonight. It's coming up very shortly. Can the Cavaliers continue their rise in the East? I mean, it's pretty impressive. If you look where they're at, you kind of figure things are going to average out a little bit, maybe. You're going to hit some road struggles, West Coast things, and, that kind of thing. But it's amazing that the Cavaliers have done so well with two of their main players out for such a long stretch of time. And it's given a lot of other players, uh, court time. And that's, or burn. And that's made them better players. So I'm hoping the Cavaliers come out and play another good game at home and push ourselves further ahead. And let's see if the 76ers can continue to plummet. We're noticing right now that the Miami Heat, who had lost a bunch of games in a row, they're suddenly winning again. And you knew they would, because it was weird that they lost 7 games in a row. Very unusual. Looking at the standings as they are right now, before I get out of here, Boston's 5 games up on Milwaukee, and those are the 2 teams. Cleveland is third, a half a game behind Milwaukee. And Milwaukee, I think, is suspect. I think Giannis is a great player, but I don't think he's surrounded by a great roster compared to other, like Boston. Boston has a really solid, well-coached roster. The Knicks are a half a game behind us, but they haven't been losing either. And until we prove that we can beat the New York Knicks and hold Jalen Brunson down, you wonder about that. Philadelphia is now 5th, and they're a game and a half behind Cleveland. And then the Indiana Pacers, who have been playing and just got Halliburton back, who's a really good basketball player. They're 10.5 down. And then fighting for the other spots right now are Orlando and Miami. Miami is only 26-24. And they lost their last game. They're 2-8 in their last 10. Orlando has won 3 in a row, so they're picking it back up. Paulo Banchero has had a very good year, and I really like Franz Wagner. I think they have a very good team, young core there. They love to play up tempo. If you can slow them down and slog them down defensively, then the Orlando Magic becomes a different team, not for the better. After that, the Bulls and the Hawks, who are under 500. So there you have it. I hope everybody has a good week, because I'll be back again on Friday, and we'll see what happens. If anything happens with the Cavaliers and the trade deadline, it's going to be a long time before football season starts again. So, I know everybody's going to be getting ready for the draft thing, but the Browns don't have that many drafts. So you're going to have to be looking at 2nd, 3rd, and 4th rounders. So we'll see what happens. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Back again on Friday. Until then, hasta la vista, Pasture Heads. Good night.